President Biden is getting upstaged. The big guy will finally be hitting the campaign trail this week after blowing it off for over a month and letting Democrats like Gavin Newsom do all the heavy lifting. The California governor has been relentlessly attacking Republicans and proposing big liberal ideas like a new 28th Amendment on guns. Newsom has already shown America that he's comfortable at the White House. We all remember his confident, sleeves-rolled-up appearance while Joe was out of town. And now Newsom is getting his message out to a larger audience by sitting down with Sean Hannity.
Do you think he's cognitively strong enough to be president?
I have conversations with him all the time, yes. And I'll tell you what.
You do?
I'm dead serious about that. I've talked to him when he's been overseas. I've been in Air Force One, Marine One. I've been in the limo with him. I've spent time with him privately.
But you never answered
publicly.
my question directly. How many times does your phone ping a day, people saying you need to get in this race because they agree with me that he's not up to the job?
I see where you're going with that.
I'm
Sean.
asking.
No, and I'm not answering.
Well, you can catch the full interview with Gavin Newsom airing tonight on Hannity at 9 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, Biden has a new excuse to stay out of the spotlight: a root canal. The president canceling all events today and letting Kamala take the reins while he was getting the dental procedure. White House reporters seem to have a lot of questions about it.
Is there any more information you can give on why he needed the root canal? Like, is he not good at brushing his teeth, or does he need to floss better, or anything else?
Wow, are you talking to the millions of Americans across the country? You're going to ask them that question, too?
I did a little research this morning.
I mean, look, I am certainly not a dentist by any means, so I cannot speak to what leads to a root canal.
Unbelievable. Instead of doing the root canal, Jesse, I want to talk about why Gavin Newsom is not forthright in answering whether or not he wants to run for president. I mean...
Well, here's what I would say if I was asked by Hannity. I'd say, well, you know, Sean, not as many times as my phone pings from people telling me I'm crazy to sit down with you. Da-da-da-da, lighten the moment, deflect, and you get away with it. But he can't even do that. That was a binder-level answer. That was a dodge. They might have to yank him as a surrogate like they did Eric Adams, because you got to be quick on your feet, and he's not. Sean's going to rat-tat-tat. He's on radio 3 hours a day. Oh, yeah. You got to have something a little bit better than that. And in terms of Biden's cognition, I've talked to people that have been in briefings with the president. They say he has good days. They say he has bad days. On the bad days, he's not paying attention at all. Talk to people who've been negotiating with the president. They say he comes in and he reads from a script. And if you interrupt him, he gets totally flabbergasted, and then his staff has to save him. If he's not falling, he's falling asleep. If he's not falling asleep, he's hiding. If he's not hiding, he's getting an emergency root canal. We are going to get to the root causes of that one of these days. He's got 31% approval, Judge. He's not debating. He's not campaigning. And he's going to arrest his opponent. Now, he's only going to do that because he can get away with it. It's like the media can make or break you. They made Fetterman a star. They can break Joe Biden with a question about the bribe, the border, inflation. It doesn't matter. Now, he reminds me, Newsom, of the quarterback. You know when the starting quarterback takes a big shot and he kind of gets up from the turf and he's like, and then you see the backup quarterback on the sideline, like, throws the helmet on and starts getting loose. That's Gavin Newsom, because the coach might make a change any day.
You know, Harold, there's got to be a reason. I mean, he sat down with Hannity for the obvious exposure it would give him. He's running around to red states trashing DeSantis. Why can't he give an answer as to, I mean, doesn't he want to run for president?
Good to be back around the table. I don't know what he wants to do. I do know, I thought it was smart to sit down with Sean. This is, to Jesse's point, this is not where you thought he might give his first interview. And certainly there is a belief that tension in terms of his philosophy about politics and Sean's. I thought one of the more telling moments, and moments we need more in politics, when Sean asked him about the homelessness issue, which we'll see more of, you'll see more of it tonight, and he owned it. Governor Newsom talked about the challenges they're having there, and he talked about housing costs, but he said there are things we should be doing better and could be doing better.
All right, let's take a listen.
We need moments more like
let's take a listen
that in
so
politics.
Our viewers know what we're talking about.
This state has not made progress in the last 2 decades as it relates to homelessness.
Why?
because housing costs are too high, our regulatory thickets are too problematic, localism has been too impactful, meaning people locally are pushing back against new housing starts and construction. I've been here 4 years. I can't make up for the fact in 2005 we had an historic number of homeless under Republican administration.
Right now there's 171,000 estimated.
Disgraceful.
Okay.
Disgraceful.
And all right, I'll compare to Florida again.
Oh, yeah.
26,000.
Of course.
Okay, same
Not even
weather,
comparable.
similar state. I mean, I've lived in both.
Dynamics are very different. That said, we own this, Sean. I'm not here defending this.
Go ahead.
So I just thought that was, when you think about where we are in politics, and we need less smallness and less pettiness, because we certainly have an abundance of that. I hope that what may come from that is perhaps the governor able to get back and work with state legislators and local leaders, including the San Francisco mayor, about things that can be done, since the governor is the former San Francisco mayor as well. But look, you asked a broader question. I'm not sure what he will do. I thought the interview served him well as governor, and if he does decide to do something, whether it's next year or a few years down the line, that was the first time I've seen him in that kind of setting in a while. I've seen him, as clips of him talking about, as he's out talking about things he's doing in California, but in a tough interview, you got to give him kudos there in how he performed.
All right, Greg, Harold was talking about less smallness and pettiness, so I'll go to you. What about the issue that, speaking of pettiness and smallness, that Newsom goes around the country and trashes DeSantis?
Well, that's to also, again, it's to raise his profile, right? He's shown up like, if you're like a lower level villain on Batman, you try to get into Batman's world by making fun of him and doing stuff like that. Gavin's kind of like the Riddler. He's not the Joker. He's the Riddler, but he wants to be the Joker. So what he's got to do is he's got to get under Bruce Wayne's skin as opposed to Batman's skin, which is Donald Trump. This is a waiting game on both sides, right? Newsom's hovering around Joe like a vulture's over a slow dying tortoise in Death Valley, just circling. Maybe he'll make it. We don't know, but they'll keep circling. Meanwhile, there's 10 people in the waiting room on the Republican side, because they're also waiting for that moment that Trump either drops out or something. So there's this weird thing going on. But 80% of the Democrats, this is an interesting thing, 80% of the Democrats, or 80% of everybody thinks their candidate should debate. Yeah. Most of them were Democrats. Yep. That's pretty interesting. But it doesn't seem like they care. And this is just a speculative thing. It doesn't look like they care. He has the lowest polling since the Big Bang. His mental decline is obvious. I compared him to a paper straw in a milkshake. It's worse than that. He's in big trouble. I think he's in big trouble, but he doesn't act like it. And with an attitude like that, it's almost like it's a foregone. Does he just believe he's going to win? That he doesn't have to worry? That the election, the nomination is in the bag? It's like he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. What does that mean? That raises a lot of suspicions. I'm sorry, but it does. If you just know you don't have to worry about a thing, what's that telling you?
All right, Dana.
I'm not following.
Well, it's rigged, Dana. The whole thing is rigged.
Dana, he can't manage one state. How could he manage all of these states?
Oh, Gavin Newsom?
Yeah.
That's a good line.
Well, Joe Biden had never managed anything, and it's just kind of showing.
There you have it.
So, I mean, there is that. I do think that governors, at least they've had some level of responsibility, whereas if you're trying to go from the Senate directly into the White House, it's much more difficult. I think that the White House is probably getting very frustrated with Gavin Newsom because nothing exposes a basement-level campaign like somebody like Gavin Newsom being willing to go on Sean Hannity's program. I am wondering at what point in my life I will stop being so naive. I was like, I love the interview. That was really great. And then William LaJeunesse pointed out that, there might be a reason Gavin Newsom's going on. I thought, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? Yes, of course, he's wanting to figure out a way because he's dealing with two contingencies. He either is planning for one of two things, that Biden doesn't ultimately he's going to get the nomination, but is he unable to serve? Is that the choice, or does it look like the Democrats are doing so poorly? We can talk about Kamala Harris later. If they're doing so poorly, then that's another thing. The other thing the White House is frustrated with, I imagine, is that they keep trying to elevate Trump. They want to run against Trump. Gavin Newsom keeps elevating DeSantis and trying to point out that DeSantis is the one that they should be more afraid of. So the White House, I think, has a big problem on their hands.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.